The media is selling a narrative of missile strikes and carrier groups. This is a deliberate misdirection. The kinetic cost of modern warfare is a liability no state, especially one facing an internal solvency crisis, can afford indefinitely. Iran's public warnings against escalation are not about a symmetric force-on-force conflict. That is a game they cannot win, and they know it. The primary vector for escalation is not explosive, it is silent. The true target is not a warship, but the global economic nervous system. CSIS reports confirm that 99% of all transcontinental data, the lifeblood of a $10 trillion daily market, flows through a few hundred undersea fiber optic cables. These are the arteries of global liquidity. A state under existential pressure does not need to match a carrier group. It simply needs to blind the system. This is the blueprint for the Blind Leviathan Protocol, a coordinated, low-cost campaign to sever these cables and blind orbital satellites. While Poland foils a single cyber attack on its grid, the real threat is systemic severance. Analysts at RUSI note the increasing sophistication of unmanned submersibles, mirroring training exercises conducted by the Royal and French navies. The capability is already deployed. The objective is not destruction, but chaos, not a declaration of war, but the creation of a global liquidity event so catastrophic that the instigator's solvency crisis becomes a footnote in a worldwide market collapse. It transforms a regional conflict into a zero-sum economic endgame. This is the mathematical certainty of asymmetric escalation. The Leviathan, blinded, will thrash, and in doing so, liquidate itself. A state's primary liability is not an external army. It is its own balance sheet. According to analysts at RUSI, prolonged unpopular wars create a terminal domestic liability. The conflict becomes a drain on financial reserves and political capital, transforming the state's budget into a countdown timer. This is not a war. It is a solvency crisis playing out in kinetic terms. When this internal decay is met with overwhelming conventional pressure, such as the advanced shipborne drones now being fielded by the Royal and French navies, a mathematical certainty emerges. The kinetic cost of a symmetric, force-on-force response becomes fiscally impossible. Every destroyed asset is an acceleration of the state's own insolvency. This weakness forces a pivot. It is a non-negotiable strategic protocol. The objective shifts from battlefield victory to imposing systemic, economic pain on the adversary. The attempted cyber attack on Poland's energy infrastructure is the blueprint. It is a low-cost operation targeting a critical economic vector designed to create maximum disruption far from any front line. Deepening internal crisis, such as the one documented within Iran, acts as the final accelerant. Leadership, facing domestic collapse, views asymmetric escalation as the only viable survival strategy. Rhetorical warnings against escalation are not threats of war. They are declarations of a launch-on-warning posture for asymmetric attacks. The state is signaling its intent to make its solvency crisis a global liquidity event. The core of this strategic shift is a simple cost-benefit analysis. A modern main battle tank is a kinetic asset valued at approximately $5 million. The FPV drone capable of neutralizing that asset costs $500. This is not speculation. According to analysis from RUSI, the Royal United Services Institute, the kill chain economics have inverted. What we are witnessing is the democratization of violence. The financial barrier to inflicting mass-scale economic damage has effectively collapsed. Any state facing an internal solvency crisis, such as the deepening crisis documented inside Iran, is now mathematically incentivized to leverage this extreme cost asymmetry. The recent training exercises by the Royal and French navies with shipborne drones are not a display of power. They are a reactive scramble against this new economic reality. The objective is no longer to win a kinetic war, but to make containment fiscally impossible for the opposing superpower, triggering a systemic liquidity event. The recent cyber attack on Poland's energy infrastructure was not a failure, it was a calibration. Reports from Poland's Prime Minister praising its defenses missed the point entirely. This wasn't an attempted takedown. It was a low-cost probe to measure response time and systemic brittleness. According to USI, these events are staged in proxy laboratories, regions selected to test economic warfare vectors without triggering a direct kinetic response. The math is simple. Why deploy a billion-dollar carrier group when a few lines of code can test the blueprint for systemic collapse? The accelerant is a solvency crisis. Reports confirm Iran is facing a deepening internal crisis, creating immense domestic pressure. Simultaneously, Western powers are demonstrating overwhelming conventional superiority. The Royal and French navies are actively training with advanced shipborne drones in the Mediterranean. This isn't a drill, it's a message of kinetic dominance. The cost for a state like Iran to compete symmetrically is infinite. Therefore, its only logical response is asymmetric, a protocol confirmed by their own official warnings against U.S. escalation in the region. This creates the gray zone doctrine. The battlefield is no longer a geographic location. It is the network of global commerce itself. The foiled attack in Poland is the evidence. CSIS analysts identify these as test beds for launch-on-warning economic attacks. The objective is not to destroy a power plant in Warsaw, but to validate a low-cost protocol for disrupting critical infrastructure globally. The target is not the asset itself, but the liquidity that depends on that asset's function. They are engineering a weapon that transforms a regional military liability into a global financial contagion. The launch-on-warning doctrine is not a decision, it is a protocol. A systemic, pre-authorized response mechanism designed to ensure a retaliatory strike is launched upon detection of an inbound kinetic attack before that attack makes impact. Its entire architecture is built on a single, fragile assumption: the integrity of data from early warning radar and satellite systems. The objective is to nullify an enemy's first strike advantage. This protocol now has a fatal systemic liability: the digital domain. A cyber attack is a low-cost, high-leverage vector. Reports confirm state-level actors are actively targeting critical infrastructure. An attempted attack on Poland's energy grid was recently foiled, establishing a clear precedent. The target is no longer just the power grid. It is the data feed for the entire nuclear command and control apparatus. This creates the fog of digital war. If a cyber attack successfully blinds the radar, the launch-on-warning protocol is inverted. The absence of a signal becomes the signal. The commander is presented with a zero-sum calculation. Is the radar dark because it is malfunctioning, or because it has been destroyed as a precursor to an imminent first strike? The doctrine compels the commander to assume the worst-case scenario. According to USI analysts, the fear compelling the launch is not emotional panic. It is a mathematical certainty dictated by the protocol itself. Hesitation guarantees 100% destruction. Launching offers a non-zero chance of survival. A state facing an internal solvency crisis, as reports suggest from Iran, and simultaneously issuing warnings against escalation, is mathematically incentivized to use asymmetric vectors like cyber warfare. The result is forcing an adversary's hand, triggering a kinetic response to a digital ghost, a systemic escalation by design. The equation is immutable. A state's internal solvency crisis, as documented in Iran's deepening economic failure, creates a launch-on-warning posture when faced with advanced conventional threats, such as the shipborne drone exercises conducted by Royal and French navies. The kinetic cost of a direct naval confrontation is prohibitive. The response, therefore, will not be kinetic. It will be systemic. Analysts at CSIS define this pivot as asymmetric escalation. Iran has issued direct warnings against continued U.S. escalation. This is not rhetoric. It is a statement of protocol. The blueprint for the counter-move has already been field-tested. The recently foiled cyber attack on Poland's energy infrastructure was not a failure. It was a data-gathering operation to measure defensive response times. Within the next 12 months, expect a calibration shot. The target will be a Tier 1 European container port, likely in the Mediterranean, integrated with automated logistics and customs data networks. A coordinated cyber event will trigger a 72-hour shutdown of all crane and terminal operating systems. It will be attributed to ransomware or a state-sponsored proxy, making direct attribution impossible. The signal, however, is not for the media. It is for the naval planners in the Fifth Fleet. The message: we can impose a liquidity crisis faster than you can deploy a carrier.